For today's practice, we're going to be balancing. So you might need something to hold on to. So maybe a chair or a countertop or a wall. And I recommend having a blanket. We will probably use one at some point. And then if you have like a tennis ball or some kind of ball, we are going to roll the feet a little bit. So something if you need it for balance, like a chair, a blanket, and then a tennis ball or some kind of ball to roll out the feet. And we're going to start seated. So you're welcome to sit on your mat, or if you have a chair, sit on your chair. And just take a moment to check in and notice how you're landing in this moment in your body. What is your embodied experience? And the embodied experience has so many layers. So noticing physically how you are. What is the felt sense physically? Which really gets us into the present moment and outside of, beyond any labels. Noticing the quality of your energy, which has a lot to do with so many things. What's been happening in your life, where you are with hormones, how well you slept or didn't sleep last night. And then feeling into the tone of any thoughts or emotions that are swirling around, which in any given moment, for many of us, it's a mix. There are so many different emotions, so many different thoughts that are present. Some we might label as positive, some we might label as negative. But can you notice for the collective, what is the overall tone? Not getting sucked into any narrative or any particular thought or emotion, other than just to acknowledge its presence. And then dipping below the level of awareness and just acknowledging that we have deeper parts. We have this subconscious or even unconscious discernment, wisdom, intuition. Notice if you feel connected or disconnected from that. And then we have the part of us that is connected to all that is. So maybe you might call that the spiritual part, the soul. And notice what that's like. And then even while we're in a seat, can you find a balance of weight from sitting bone to sitting bone? And if you notice you're leaning forward or you're leaning back, can you find a balanced place that feels like the shoulders are stacked over the hips, rib cage is stacked over the pelvis? And you might notice, especially if you weren't there already, that the core engages because we're balancing. So take a couple of breaths here, noticing how that feels to be in this place of balancing. Inviting the breath to be soft and easy. And then blink your eyes open if they were closed. And you're welcome here to take any movements. Maybe you move the arms or the head and neck or the shoulder blades. And we're going to, in just a second, roll out the feet. You're welcome to stay seated, especially if you're in a chair and not on the floor. If you're sitting on the floor or would just rather come into a standing position, I recommend you stand. So the instructions will work either way, whether you're sitting in a chair or standing. So you're going to take your ball. If you don't have a ball for this, you could roll up, like a little hand towel, or just take something, and something that's not hard. So like golf ball, too hard, lacrosse ball, too hard. Whatever it is, put your heel on the floor and the ball of your foot on the ball, your ball on the ball. And then just take your weight a little bit into the ball and then out of the ball. And notice what shifts. And you're welcome to have your hands on the back of a chair if that would be helpful for balance here. The next time you have your weight forward, then pause. Take 1, maybe 2 breaths, so stay in tune with the breath. And then begin to take your foot a little side to side. So massaging the ball of the foot side to side. And we should have done a test before this. So if you're watching this video later, before this, maybe check your balance and see what it's like first. And then begin to roll the ball up and down towards the heel and back towards the toes with whatever amount of pressure feels comfortable. So hands on a chair, the back of a chair is nice. You could also have your hands on your hips. And this is doing a lot of things. We're releasing fascia and tissue from the bottom of the foot and then up the back side of the body, but we're also waking up proprioceptors, the nervous system, and saying, hey, we're about to do something with the feet. Then, if it's available, take the top of your foot to the floor and your heel a little bit forward of your actual heel. The ball is a little forward of your actual heel. Any amount of pressure. And then a little side to side at the heel. And then give that leg a shake. And stand for a moment and just notice. And you might even walk around a little bit and notice one side versus the other. And then we're going to do the other side. So whichever foot you haven't done already, heel is on the mat and the ball of the foot is on the ball. And then you're just going to rock your weight into the ball and back a couple of times. Maybe curling your toes around the ball if it feels good, or lifting them up. Do whatever is feeling good. Making sure that you're breathing the whole time. The jaw is nice and soft. The belly is soft, although even here there's an element of balance, hence the chair, if it's available there, if you would need it or want it. Then take your weight into the ball and pause. And notice the breath. So this tissue on the bottoms of the feet has a direct connection to the pelvic floor. And the jaw. So if you're a jaw clencher or a belly clencher, believe it or not, rolling out your feet can be helpful. So then here, take side to side. And it's okay if you move your whole body, not just the foot. I'm not super worried about that right now, as long as your foot is getting that input. And then come up and down towards the heel and back. And again, you have a wall or a counter or a chair available if you need to, or hands on hips can be nice here. Just this sense of waking up the bottom of the foot. So whatever amount of pressure is helpful for you to wake things up. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it can be if it feels good, especially depending on what you're on. If you're on a tennis ball, you could give a little pressure. Certainly if it's something very soft, you could give more pressure. And then pause with the top of the foot on the floor and the ball a little bit in front of the heel. And then give whatever amount of pressure You're welcome to come back and forth a couple times like we did with the top of the foot. And then take the ball side to side here. Like remember in the olden days when people smoked? This is like the I'm stomping out my cigarette butt kind of movement. I grew up in a smoking household. So that's what this reminds me of. And then give that leg a shake. And then maybe notice how it feels to stand and or to walk around a little bit. Just feeling into like not just the feet, but like this kind of gentle lift up through the body, how that feels. And then come back into a balanced place of neutral, just standing, feet below the hips. And we're moving towards a balance. So if you want to have your whatever support handy, have your support handy. I'll show it both ways. But begin to feel the heels connecting with the ground, the balls of the feet. So big toe mound, pinky toe mound. Maybe lift up your toes and kind of feel into that. And then soften your toes down. Can you still feel that little tripod on the bottom of each foot? And then imagine there is this hugging in towards your core. Like, I don't mean abdomen when I say core. I mean like the core of the earth, this like central axis right down the center line of the body, hugging in and up. So the inner legs, the inner arches of the feet, hugging in and up towards the pelvic floor, up into the abdomen, up along the spine, basically, up towards the soft palate of the mouth, up towards the center of the brain, and up out of the crown of the head. And you might even feel like there's an activation of the core, that you're balancing up against gravity here, that you're holding your body up. Take your hands to your hips. We're not going to balance quite yet. And then we're going to move the pelvis. So take your pelvis and tilt it forward. So stick your booty out. And then tilt the pelvis back. You're going to draw your pubic bone up. And then move back. Do my hands here so you can see. Just rocking. And feel what happens in the feet as you do. And feel what happens with the breath. And maybe even with the core. So core engagement, super important for balance. Take one more. And then come back to neutral. So from here, we're going to do one more thing before we balance. You're welcome to rock side to side. So another thing that is, in my opinion, really important for balance is for our brain to have a map for the movement of our leg bone in the pelvis. So the leg bone and the pelvis are two separate things. And for us to be able to, for example, float one leg up and take it around in a circle while the pelvis is quiet and still is an important skill. So this could be the test that you do before and after, depending on how your balance is. Or it could just be that you stand on one leg for a moment before and after. But this distinction, and so when we do these pelvic tilts, we're keeping our leg bones still and moving the pelvis. Whereas when we float one leg up and around, we're keeping the pelvis still and moving the leg bone. So we need to be able to do both things in order to balance well. So have your support handy, and if you need it, or stand with your hands on your hips. So I'm going to show it with my hands on my hips first. So feeling into your tripods of your feet, noticing your breath, and having a sense that your pelvis is in the middle. It's not tilted forward. It's not tilted back. There's this neutral curve, right? This little lumbar curve. And then begin to bring flexion into one knee, shifting your weight into the other foot, and then switch flexion into the opposite leg, shifting your weight. And we're just going to start here at first. You're welcome to take a hand to the chair if needed. And I want you to feel as the weight shifts into that leg, the tripod, the heel, pinky toe mound, big toe mound. And you might feel your core differently than with 2 feet on the ground. Make sure that you still have a soft jaw and that you're not holding your breath. The next time you take your weight over, it doesn't really matter which side, pause, and then maybe float your toes above the mat. Again, you're welcome to have support. See if you can still feel the tripod of that standing leg foot, still have a soft jaw, and still breathe. Take one last breath. Soften down. If you need to, in between sides, pedal it out. Then shift your weight to the other side, flex at the hip, and then maybe float the toes away from the mat, any amount. And you could keep touching down if you need to. See if you can feel into the tripod of that standing leg. Soft jaw, soft breath. And then release. Pedal it out a little bit. We're going to add on. And if you need to, give your arms a wiggle, give them a break. So come back to your first side, shifting your weight into that foot, feel the tripod. And then instead of just floating your toes up, you're going to float your foot back so that your leg from your hip down to your knee is in the same plane as the other leg. And then feel the tripod of your standing leg foot, feel a soft jaw, feel the movement of breath, and notice how this is different. Take one more breath, and then release. With or without some rocking, we're going to shift the weight to the other side. Flex so that your weight goes into that leg, and then take the leg back so that your leg from your hip to your knee is as if you were standing on the ground. Softly breathing, soft jaw, whatever amount of support is needed, feeling into the tripod of that standing leg foot. And then release. Give yourself a little rock side to side. So the first time when we took the leg forward, and you don't have to do this, you can rock and watch, we were asking the hip flexor to engage to hold the leg up. This time, when we take the leg back, we're asking mostly the hamstring to hold the leg up. So getting different experiences. Now, we're going to ask the outside of the leg to hold the leg up. So come into whichever leg you want to start with, bring some flexion, find most of the weight in that standing leg, and then you're going to float your leg out away from the body, any amount. It doesn't have to be much. You can have your hand on support, hands on hips, and then breathe and notice what this is like. Can you stay connected to the tripod of that standing leg foot? Notice maybe if you did a little less, would it be easier to stay connected to the tripod? Soft jaw and breathing. Last breath. Then release. Find a little movement. And then shift. Standing leg becomes the opposite leg. A little flexion. Opposite hip. Feeling the weight coming down into the tripod. And then taking that lifted leg up and out. Any amount. It doesn't have to be much. And you might feel, you could have guessed, but you might feel it. The muscles on the outside of the leg and hip are holding the leg in place now. These muscles have a huge impact on the functionality, I should say, of your core. Take 2 more breaths. And then come back. And then maybe find some rocking. So just as a recap before we do one more thing, you have feet that are related to balance, so waking up the nerves in the feet so that the feet are aware of what the surface that they're on, which we're going to explore again in a minute. Yes, we have time. And then there are this relationship between the pelvis and the legs, and they need to be separate entities that work independently of each other. And then there's this aspect of front of the hips, the outside of the hips versus the back side of the body. What is holding the leg. So when we had the leg bent here and the hamstrings were holding, if we would have had the leg straight back, then it would have been the glutes. So that's another thing that you could do. But for now, I want you to take something soft like a blanket or a cushion or pillow or something onto your mat. And depending on your balance, you could keep it flat, or you could kind of scrunch it up like sand at the beach where it's not totally even. That's what I'm going to do. Either way, and then come into standing on it. And notice how this is different already. So we're going to do all the things we just did again here, starting with just taking your weight into one leg, flexing right at the hip crease, taking your weight into the other leg. Again, you're welcome to have your support if you need it. And noticing how it's different. To find the tripod in the feet here is different because the surface is different. It's not a flat, even man-made surface. And this is good for the feet. It's good for the muscles in the feet to get this different surface topography, different texture. So if that's feeling okay, find a leg to stand on. Do your best to find the tripod and then just float your toes up. So this time the hip flexor is holding the leg. Maintaining that soft jaw and the movement of breath. So this is a lot of work for the ankles as well. Just want to acknowledge that. There's a lot of course correcting happening in my ankle that I can feel. And then release. And right away, we're going to go to the other side. Taking your weight into the other leg and then floating your foot up, feeling the hip muscle, the front of the hip, feeling into the tripod of the foot. And then just noticing, are you breathing? Is there a lot of course correcting happening? Last breath. And then release, maybe a little rocking. And then this time, taking your weight into one leg and then floating your leg back so the hip to the knee is in line. Same thing, feeling into your tripod, soft jaw, soft breath, whatever amount of support you need, and just noticing what's happening. So lots less stability on an uneven surface, on a squishy, mushy surface. So this is good training for the ankles and the core and all the things. And then release. Shift right away to the other side. And then you're going to take your leg back. So the top of the leg is even with the standing leg. And then noticing all the things. Can you find a soft way of being with the breath? Still feel that hugging in at the center of the body and up. Last breath here. And then release. Pedal it out or shift a little side to side. One more. And then we get to relax. So from here, find a standing leg. Flex the opposite hip. And then take that leg out to the side. Any amount. This is the one that my hips are like, what? So your standing leg hip is working, and now the lifted leg hip, the outside of the hip, is working. If you were just going to do one of these, this is the one I would recommend, but only if you can do the other ones as well. Last breath. Come back to center, switch sides, bringing flexion into the opposite hip, and then floating your leg out any amount to the side. If you float too much out to the side, then your pelvis begins to move. So keeping the pelvis pretty quiet here. And you might notice your breath deepen. So these are bigger muscles. They require more oxygen, placing bigger demands on the body, on the system. Last breath. Then release. Then a little shaking side to side. From here, you can set your squishy surface Actually, you can take your squishy surface. We're going to come down into a resting position. If you want to put your legs up on a chair and you're using a chair or a couch or whatever surface, you could do that. I recommend taking your blanket to your mat for your body. If you're just going to have your legs on the floor, then maybe take something under the knees. And if you're like me and my femurs are a little shorter than this distance, then maybe take something like a blanket under your hips. And make your way into a comfortable shape that is a resting shape. Give the toes a wiggle, point and flex from the ankle, and then roll the ankles one direction and then the other. You're welcome to have your arms out wide or even overhead if it's comfortable. And then just watch the body breathing. Maintaining that soft jaw, soft awareness, soft movement of breath, soft belly. And we're going to be here for 1 or 2 minutes. Become aware again of the body breathing. And you are welcome to linger, to stay longer, to pause. If you are ready to transition, then begin to maybe wiggle fingers and toes. Maybe you open and close the jaw or move the head a little bit. Depending on where you are, you might find a full body stretch or a hugging in of knees. And any movements might feel nice to rock a little side to side. Maybe even pausing on one side or another before rolling to one side, taking a breath and then making your way up into a seat. You're always welcome to end lying down as well. If you are coming into a seat, just make sure it's comfy, that you can feel the breath. Notice how you feel in body, the tone or quality of your energy, the tone of mind, thoughts, emotions. Notice if you feel any differently connected to discernment, wisdom, intuition, or that part of you that we might call spirit or soul, or maybe even the true self. We'll take some final breaths together here. Allow your next breath to move in through the nose, out through the nose. Again, breathing softly in through the nose and out. Final breath, deep inhale through the nose. This time exhale out of the mouth. Namaste.